Before we start envisioning the future, we would like to review the past and evaluate our present. We've had some difficult times, times of triumph, times of loss, yet where we are today is the result of the past. So where are we now in terms of our development in comparison to the other countries? In terms of Human Development Index, we stand out of 189 countries at 92. In terms of ease of doing business, we stand at 74. This is just to say that we are right in the middle, and if we don't claw our way up, we can very easily slip downwards, or we can climb up to be one of the greatest nations in the world. I want to show you an interesting picture of GDP per capita between China and Mongolia. The reason that I'm drawing China is because many of us have been to China in the 1990s, and many of us know how fast it has developed and where we are right now. This actually shows, for instance, before the 1990s, GDP per capita in Mongolia was actually higher. And then from the 1992 to 1996, we were about the same. And then China grew very fast. Right now, it's almost a threefold of that of Mongolia. This is to say, China relates this increase in the GDP per capita growth and this astounding growth to stable policies, consistent policies, and stable political policies. On the other hand, we have faced some difficult times. Today, for instance, such things as environmental pollution, things like unemployment, poverty, these are issues that we have inherited from the past that we believe because it's rampant today, it will probably still be happening in the future sometime. But if we don't unite and work on these issues right now, probably 10 years from now, 20 years from now, another TEDx talk will be held here talking about how we have resolved the issue and how it has actually deteriorated over time. Bigger countries have big problems. We also have big problems. Everybody thinks, for instance, comparing ourselves to Japan, comparing ourselves to US, why are we not there yet? And we have to take into consideration that nobody but us will have to take us there. I remember in 2001, when I was studying in China, China has been awarded to host 2008 Olympics. This was an astounding news in China. This has completely electrified the whole country. There were construction works happening here, development works happening there. The whole country was working towards something, a common purpose, that the whole world's eyes will be on China, and they didn't want to lose face. Even some of the most remote villages were having construction work down. The chances of actually having a tourist there were close to zero, but yet that is how much everybody was looking towards it. What we need is probably a common dream, and this is today why we're sitting here today amongst all of you, trying to figure out what our dreams are. My grandmother had 8 children, and she used to tell me that I never had to worry about my children's future as long as I raised them well. I know that the country will take care of everything. Today, as soon as we have children, even before we had children, we start worrying about our health, their health, whether they can even go to kindergarten, whether they would be able to have a mortgage program to buy a house, whether even after they graduate university, whether they will be able to find a job. My dream is quite simple. I want to retire in a country where I don't have to worry about my children's future, where I know that if I raise them well, that they will be able to get a good life, that they will be able to get good education. If they get good education and if they have the right set of skills, that they will be able to find a good job. If they find a good job, that they will be able to make a good living. That I know that before they get old, that they don't get ill. This is the kind of country that we want to build, and that is my idea of a Mongolian dream. Simple as it may sound, it is sometimes hard to actually come to realize. Just to give you a ballpoint of number of sometimes how small our economy is in comparison. For instance, in 2009, the movie Avatar, when it was released, it had a box office of a revenue of about $2.8 billion. In 2009, our budget revenue was around $1.4 billion. Half the size of Avatar's revenue. That year, for instance, Rio Tinto's operating cost was around $34 billion. Its repairs and maintenance cost was about $1.8 billion. That year, our budget expenditure was about $1.7 billion. In other words, our whole public services were operating with a cost of less than maintenance and repairs cost of Rio Tinto. And it's not even the biggest expenditure item. But this is not to say we haven't made progress. Since the year 2000, our economy has seen a 23-fold increase. We have made improvements in so many areas that from the latest World Economic Forum Inclusive Growth Index, for instance, we are one of the top-tier countries that have made improvement in terms of the inclusiveness of our economy. But at the same time, challenges that we face today require each and every one of us to be involved. I remember when I was studying at Yale, I was talking with a friend of mine who was a PhD student, and I said, well, you have a PhD from Yale. I'm very certain that you'll be working in the States, probably in IMF or in World Bank. And he said, no, I will actually be going back because I'm going to make a bigger contribution back at home in China. I was a bit embarrassed because one person after 1.3 billion thinks he is very significant, that he will make a contribution to his country. While on the other hand, we sometimes believe the issues today will be resolved by somebody, by the politicians, by the government, probably by IMF, and then somehow we will walk into a better country. And that doesn't always happen. I was working in East Timor as a consultant for public financial management projects, and another consultant from the States, he asked me where I was from. And when I said I'm from Mongolia, he was a bit surprised and said, what are you doing here? It seems that your country needs you more than probably East Timor. That's one of the reasons why I got back, to try to make at least a little bit of contribution to my country. And I urge especially those of you who are studying abroad, who have dreams and aspirations, this is the place to be. When I left States in late 2009, US was facing economic difficulties. Well, it was a boom in Mongolia. And when I quit my job in the States, everybody was a bit surprised. Where are you going? What are you going to be doing? And I remember somebody from my office asked me, so what does your husband do? Thinking that I must have a very wealthy husband. And I said he works in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he asked how much money he makes. And at that time, public servants had about $200 per month as a salary. I was a bit embarrassed to say $200, so I said 200. And he got me completely wrong, and he actually thought my husband was a Minister of Foreign Affairs, and that he makes $200,000 a month, because usually, Americans, they talk in whole annual salary. I knew that he got it wrong, but I actually didn't go back to let him know, because I actually left my colleagues thinking that I'm a wife of a foreign minister who makes $200,000 a month. For us, the most important thing is we're a very young country. We have aspirations. From day to day, we sometimes lose our way. I know that the lives of today sometimes put strain on your dreams and your aspirations. But we have a lot of opportunities. We can go down to a list of things, the problems that we have. We can say because we're landlocked, trade is difficult. Because of the cold weather, fighting pollution is difficult. Because of the big land mass, building infrastructure is difficult. We can find difficulties and the challenges, we can blame it on somebody or something. But we also have to look at what we have, the opportunities that are present to us. Having a big mineral endowment is a mixed blessing. If we use it well, this is going to be a starting, I guess in a way, financial revenue for our country to have another 100 years, 200 years of growth, of opportunities that it can present to its people. For instance, right now, only 6.6% of our 1.5 million square kilometers of land has been explored or under exploration. Yet our approved geographical reserve, we are number 10 in terms of our coal reserves in the world. We have, 10% of our coal reserves of the world in Mongolia, and number 4 in terms of the copper reserves. This is just to say how much opportunity that there is from the mineral endowments. Number 2, we are one of the youngest nations in Asia. Top 10 youngest countries in the world all reside in Africa. Nigeria being 57% of its population under the age of 18. I was surprised to read that almost 7.4% children for each woman. While the whole most of the Asian and most of the developed countries are struggling with graying population, aging population, we are happy to say that about 30% of our population is under the age of 18. Around 60% of our population is under the age of 35. Few countries in Asia can rival in this important development index. For instance, by 2050, Japan, around 20 million workforce will be gone. They're trying to come up with policies, increasing of labor force to make up for the fact. There is a fear that some Asian countries will grow old before they grow rich. So this is for us an endowment that we have to take into consideration. Number 3, we have one of the most well-educated population. Access to education is very high. Enrollment in schools is about 99%. Completion of schools is also very high in Mongolia. Dropout rates are quite low. We have good attendance in higher education. And these are all factors that we have to take into consideration, that we also have to take pride in. I remember when I was working in developing countries, we would build schools and they wouldn't have teachers. We would build hospitals, yet they don't have doctors. They would want to have their own airline company, and it would take them years to actually train their own pilot. However, on the other hand, if we have schools, we have teachers, we have hospitals, we have doctors. We even have an airline company, and our pilots are flying all around the world. We're also located in one of the most stable regions in the world. Asia makes up about 60% of the world economic growth. When I was working in Ethiopia, I remember Ethiopia is also a landlocked country like Mongolia. The closest sea access is Somalia. Somalia has low-skilled workforce, poor infrastructure, and they are known to be some of the, especially within the region, most difficult countries to do trade with. Even providing grant, even providing some food and service to Ethiopia is so difficult that the country doesn't have mineral resources, doesn't have the population or the well-education, and doesn't also reside in a stable region. Sometimes we don't take into account the consideration how much opportunity being located in a stable region, being neighbors to 2 of the largest economies, what it really means. Everybody wants to do business with China. Everybody wants to be close to China. Everybody wants to sell something to China. Yet we're right next door. We have all the opportunities if we can produce it. This is to say that opportunities are there if we take into account. All of us, we believe that our future is bright. Yet, if we don't go as fast as we would like, in 3 years' time, in 30 years' time, we're not going to be able to catch up. The pace of speed in some of the countries, for instance, countries like Laos, countries like Vietnam, countries like Cambodia are growing at a rate that is going to challenge us, that if we don't grow at least at a rate of about 4 or 5% per annum, we're not going to be able to keep up with their economic pace. We will probably lose some of the assets that we have inherited from the past, like good education, like good healthcare, some of the infrastructure that we have, for which this generation is responsible for. The message that I want to give to everybody is, as former President Kennedy was saying, ask not what your country can do for you, but we have to ask ourselves what we can do for our country. We're a young population. We have to be responsible citizens. We have to be involved citizens. We have to make sure that we are involved in drawing the picture of our future. Our future is full of possibilities, yet we sit back and sometimes take it easy and we relax. Sometimes I even hear people saying, when it gets better, I'm going to get back to Mongolia. When it gets better, I will be involved with the process. You have to be involved with the process today to make things better. Let us envision our future together, because we all want to be living in a country where we don't have to worry about our children's futures. Thank you so much.